In 1346, the Mongol army committed what may be history's first documented act of biological warfare, and it changed human civilization forever. When their soldiers started dropping dead from a mysterious illness, they didn't bury the bodies. Instead, they loaded infected human corpses onto giant siege engines and launched them over the city walls. That single act of biological warfare may be the terrifying true origin of the worst pandemic in human history, the Black Death, the second plague pandemic, which went on to kill as many as 50 million people across Europe alone. Was the Black Death actually caused by biological warfare? This is that story. This is the story of the Siege of Caffa, and how one desperate military decision on the coast of Crimea may have unleashed a catastrophe that took 2 centuries to recover from. To understand what happened at Caffa, you need to understand what Caffa was. Modern-day Feodosia, Ukraine, this fortified port city ranked among the most important trading posts in the medieval world. Controlled by the Republic of Genoa, it sat on the Black Sea coast of the Crimean Peninsula, a critical node connecting Silk Road commerce to Mediterranean trade networks. Goods, gold, and people flowed through Caffa constantly. In every sense, it was a gateway between East and West. The Genoese had secured their trading rights through treaties with the Mongols, specifically the Golden Horde, a powerful offshoot of Genghis Khan's empire that controlled vast stretches of Eurasia from its capital at Sarai on the Volga River. But treaties between empires and merchant republics were fragile things. In 1343, a brawl broke out between Italians and Muslims in the nearby Venetian trading colony of Tana, modern-day Azov, and that brawl escalated fast. Johnny Beg, the Khan of the Golden Horde, used it as justification to besiege Caffa. Johnny Beg was not a man to be underestimated. He had seized power in 1341 after defeating his own older brother, Teeny Beg, following the death of their brother Oz Beg Khan, one of the most powerful rulers in Golden Horde history, and a man who had made the Horde a dominant force across Eurasia. He commanded a massive Crimean Tatar force, and in 1343 he threw it against Caffa's walls. The city held. An Italian relief force arrived by sea and lifted the siege in February. So Johnny Beg tried again in 1345, and this time he settled in for a long wait. But as the months dragged on, something far worse than Italian reinforcements arrived in the Mongol camp. An Italian notary named Gabriele de' Musi, writing from the city of Piacenza, later recorded what happened based on accounts from Genoese refugees. He described it with a kind of apocalyptic awe. It was as though arrows were raining down from heaven to strike and crush the Mongols. A mysterious disease was tearing through Johnny Beg's army, killing soldiers faster than any enemy could. And that's where the story takes its darkest turn. According to de' Musi's account, the Mongol commanders made a decision that would echo through the centuries. Rather than retreating from the dying camp, they weaponized their own dead. They ordered corpses to be placed in catapults and lobbed into the city, de' Musi wrote, in the hope that the intolerable stench would kill everyone inside. Technically, they weren't catapults. They were trebuchets, massive counterweight-driven siege engines capable of hurling loads of 100 kilos or more. A catapult, which relies on twisted cordage, couldn't throw anything nearly that heavy. These machines were designed to hurl boulders through fortification walls, but instead, they were loaded with plague-riddled human remains. Why did the Mongols think this would work? Because of how medieval medicine understood disease. The dominant theory of the age was miasma, the idea that illness came from poisonous vapors, foul air, bad smells. The ancient Greek physician Galen had promoted this concept centuries earlier, and by the 1300s it was medical orthodoxy. If disease came from corrupted air, then rotting corpses launched over walls would, in theory, poison the atmosphere inside the city. It was a horrifying logic, but to the medieval mind, it was perfectly rational. And whatever the mechanism, it appears to have worked. The plague took hold inside Caffa. De' Musi's account of what happened next is haunting. Genoese traders, terrified, fled the city by ship, crossing the Black Sea toward Constantinople, and they carried the disease with them. Alas, our ships enter the port, de Mussi wrote, but of 1,000 sailors hardly 10 are spared. We reach our homes, our kindred and our neighbors come from all parts to visit us. Woe to us, for we cast at them the darts of death. Whilst we spoke to them, whilst they embraced us and kissed us, we scattered the poison from our lips. By the summer of 1347, plague had reached Constantinople. By October, 12 Genoese ships docked at the Sicilian port of Messina, and the people who gathered on the docks were met with a nightmarish sight. Most of the sailors were already dead, and those still alive were covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. The Black Death had arrived in Europe. What followed was annihilation on a scale almost impossible to comprehend. Half of Paris's 100,000 residents perished. Florence's population collapsed from 120,000 to 50,000. At least 60% of Hamburg and Bremen were wiped out, and across Europe as a whole, somewhere around 60% of the entire population died. The continent wouldn't recover to its pre-plague population until around 1550, 2 full centuries later. This was the second plague pandemic, far deadlier than the plague of Justinian that had ravaged the Byzantine Empire 7 centuries before, and it would not be the last outbreak the world would face. Now, it's important to be honest about what we know and what we don't. De Mussi himself almost certainly was not at Caffa. Archival records show him signing legal documents in Piacenza throughout much of this period, so he was working from second-hand accounts. Scholar Jean-Pascal Zanders has argued that the corpse catapulting story doesn't hold up under scrutiny, that it doesn't match how medieval artillery actually worked, or the geography of Caffa's defenses. And Mark Wheelis, who wrote the definitive 2002 study on the siege, concluded that while the biological warfare claim is plausible, plague's entry into Europe from Crimea likely would have occurred independently, through rats, through trade routes, through the simple, unstoppable movement of an organism that had already been spreading for years, carried in the gut of the oriental rat flea Xenopsilochiopus, the primary biological vector responsible for transmitting Yersinia pestis from rodents to humans. A groundbreaking 2022 DNA study traced the Black Death's true origin not to Caffa at all, but to a trading community near Lake Issyk-Kul in modern Kyrgyzstan, where tombstones from 1338 and 1339 list pestilence as the cause of death. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute found that plague-causing bacteria from those graves were direct ancestors of the strains that devastated Europe. The pandemic was already in motion before the first corpse ever sailed over Caffa's walls. And then there's the Plague Doctor, that iconic beaked figure we associate with the Black Death. Here's the thing, those costumes didn't exist during the Black Death. The Plague Doctor costume, complete with its bird-like mask stuffed with lavender, mint, and vinegar-soaked sponges to ward off miasma, wasn't invented until 1619 by the French physician Charles de Lorme, nearly 3 centuries after the pandemic. Many plague doctors of the actual Black Death era weren't even trained physicians. They were barber surgeons and apothecaries, and their treatments, bloodletting and induced vomiting, were as likely to kill you as save you. And here's something that should genuinely unsettle you. Plague hasn't gone anywhere. The World Health Organization estimates that between 1,000 and 2,000 cases of plague still occur every year, primarily in parts of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Yersinia pestis and its flea vector are still out there. We simply got better at treating it. What the Siege of Caffa really gives us isn't a simple origin story, it's something more unsettling. It shows us that human beings 7 centuries ago already understood the terrible power of weaponized disease, even if their understanding of why it worked was completely wrong. They didn't know about Yersinia pestis, the bacterium Alexandra yersin wouldn't identify until 1894. They thought they were poisoning the air, but instead, they may have been seeding a city with one of the deadliest organisms on Earth. Whether or not those trebuchets truly launched the Black Death, the Siege of Caffa remains one of history's most chilling intersections of warfare and pandemic. A moment where military desperation and biological catastrophe collided, and the world was never the same.